Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you are in the stream, the home edition. This is my living room. I am going to be broadcasting from my living room for goodness knows how long, and that is because the team at the stream is not just talking about social distancing, we are practicing social distancing, but it doesn't mean that we cannot be connected, and you know how we do that. We do that through our live YouTube shows and discussions. So if you're on YouTube, you can actually have a conversation with our guests, you can talk to them, you can push back if you want to, and of course we're always on Twitter at AJ Stream. So the conversation today is about the coronavirus and prisons, not prisons just in the US, but prisons around the world. Have an amazing lineup of guests, and they will introduce themselves. Olivia, tell everybody who you are.
Thanks for having me. I'm Olivia Rope, Policy Director for Penal Reform International. We're an international organisation and we work to ensure fair and effective criminal justice systems.
Good to have you. Hello, Nicole. Tell everybody, who are you?
Hi, good to be with you. My name is Nicole Lewis. I'm a staff writer at the Marshall Project, and we are a nonprofit newsroom based in New York City that covers the criminal justice system in the United States.
And Adnan, hello.
Hi, my name is
Introduce yourself,
Adnan.
Adnan.
Yes, hi, my name is Adnan Khan. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Restore Justice. We are a justice advocacy organization.
Adnan, there was a tweet that I was watching on your Twitter feed. It really jumped out at me because I was thinking, as we're talking about this subject, coronavirus and prisons, this is what I was thinking. This is Adnan's tweet here. When I tell people that gatherings of hundreds and hundreds of people are still happening right now, literally all across the US, people get outraged. But as soon as I tell them these gatherings are happening inside of our prisons and jails, all of a sudden it becomes okay. I just want to address this straight off. There'll be people watching who think this has got nothing to do with me. Adnan, what would you say to those people?
Well, first of all, I think we have to understand how what happens inside our prison system affects us out here. If I could give a quick number, a very small number, which is actually a very large number, here in California, we have over 120,000 people incarcerated in our prison system. There are 67,000 staff that come in and out of these facilities every 8 hours, right? Because prisons never shut down. Prisons are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. And what that really means is that 67,000 staff are going in and out of these facilities every 8 hours back into our communities. And so when people don't care about what's happening inside, when people don't care that these social gatherings are happening inside prison facilities, I would like everyone to think about how that implicates you and how that affects you.
Nicole, you've been doing some reporting which really connects with families, and you understand how families are going through this period of time, and there's a lot of fear. Can you give us an example of how scared some families are for their loved ones who happen to be in prison?
Sure, yeah. I mean, families are kind of panicking right now. I'd say the biggest thing to consider is that visitation is shut down across the country. So in state and federal prisons, you're no longer able to go in and see your loved one. And so that means that they've lost a really critical window into their loved one's well-being. So I heard from one woman named Yesenia Guzman, whose mother is incarcerated in California. And she, up until coronavirus hit, was receiving cancer treatment. And so her mom, as coronavirus is spreading in the state, or her daughter-in-law was really, trying to figure out, well, where is my mom? Is she still being transferred out? Is she okay? Is she sick? Is the prison under lockdown? She just didn't have answers. And there was no direct way, right, to get in contact with her mother. And oftentimes, family members say that prison officials simply just do not call them back, just don't return their calls. So they're really working, operating in the dark here.
Olivia, I see you nodding. Articulate your nod. What's going on? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Nicole's talking about, sadly, we're seeing the world over. And the other thing with shutting down visitation rights, I mean, while in some cases it can be legitimate to prevent coronavirus hitting prisons, which would be disastrous. On the other hand, in many countries, people coming to prisons bring essential items, and I'm talking about food, medicines. Colleagues were telling me the other day that in Kenya, women prisoners don't have access to sanitary pads at the moment, because these are usually provided by charities and family members. So, you know, there's some pretty serious issues coming out of these bans of visits, which we've seen pretty much the world over. That's been the main kind of prevention measure brought in.
I want to dip into YouTube because our audience on YouTube want to ask you some questions, Guess. So this is Babagna Zana. I think that we should consider letting non-violent offenders with less than 6 months jail time go. Who wants to take that first of all?
I know you've all got a perspective.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump right into that. I think that to make those distinctions of only letting non-violent people out, and I think what society is thinking when they say that is that society will not be harmed because people are not physically violent that we're letting out when we say non-violent. But the truth is, and it's a sad truth, that the highest recidivism rate is actually people who are convicted of those crimes, sadly. And it's not so much the responsibility of those individuals. I really believe, not believe, but it's factual that the responsibility relies or falls on the state and the government, because the number one reason why people come back to prison once they get out is housing and employment. People don't have a place to stay. People don't have a place to work. And so that's the sad part about the high recidivism rate of people who are nonviolent. So factually, at least here in California, the previous governor, who was governor for 8 years, Jerry Brown, under his governorship, over 5,000 people that were once serving life sentences have been released. And the recidivism rate has been, last time I checked, was less than 1%. So what that really says is factually, the people that we can safely let out are the people who've been in prison a long time, are the people who have once served life sentences. And the disparity between violent and nonviolent is actually not a safe one to say for us in society.
I want to
add to that as well.
Nicole, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. At the Marshall Project, we published a piece some years ago that looked at the kinds of crimes that were listed violent. And what we found is that in some states, there were many crimes deemed violent where no violence actually occurred. There was no human victim, right? Things like burglary, depending on whether or not you have a firearm in your possession, could change the sort of definition of a violent crime. So in some senses, that notion is a false dichotomy in the first place, right? We're making this distinction between crimes when the law isn't so clear. And then the other sort of consideration is that when we think about what it means that people have, gone to prison, served their time. In many cases, people have become transformed over the course of their incarceration, right? And so someone who committed a crime, a violent crime, potentially at 15, and who has served, 30 years, 40 years, may be in a completely different place by the end of their sentence. And so what do we say to these people as well? And I think a lot of advocates on the ground are sort of pushing to say, we have to sort of stop framing the conversation in this way, look more broadly, and really think about individual people and what they've been able to accomplish during their time.
Let me just
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Adnan, can I add something before you add something?
Yes.
And then we're going to be in good shape with our adding. All right. Beep68 is on YouTube right now. Beep68 says, we are letting prisoners who only got 2 months to serve go free in the UK. Adnan, go ahead.
Yes, I think I'll jump on that in a second. If I could just build a little ethos for myself. So at the age of 18, I was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. 25 years to life, which meant that I had 25 years before appearing before a parole board, which is not a guaranteed ticket home, or spending the rest of my life in prison, was essentially I was sentenced to death by natural cause, or whatever reason, however I would lose my life. But I served 16 years altogether until the same judge that sentenced me to 25 years to life, 16 years later, resentenced me to 3 years after a law change. And that's how I've been out. I've been out a little bit over a year now. And so when we talk about violent, nonviolent, we really need to look at how, again, like it's already been mentioned here many times, who are we talking about? What type of people are we talking about? We're talking about teenagers who are now adults. We know people age out of crime. Those are all facts. So I would like people to look at facts. And here in the United States, for me, when I want to look at facts, I'll listen to Dr. Fauci. When I want entertainment, I'll listen to Donald Trump. When I want to laugh or look for a comedy show. So those are when we talk about facts, I make sure that I'm making sound decisions based on true numbers, true facts, and investigation.
So Dr.
Can I
Fauci,
just say,
excuse me 1 minute, guys, I'm just going to squeeze this in, and then you can go for it. So Dr. Fauci is the head doctor leading the coronavirus strategy for the United States. So he's a very prominent person who we see often on television. Olivia, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it back to coronavirus and the question around releases, which we've seen releases from Burkina Faso to, thousands, tens of thousands of people being released in Iran. I think the main question is, what are the consequences if those releases do not happen, and if we retain the crazy levels of overcrowding and occupancy rates of up to 500% that we see in the Philippines? Prisons that I've been in sub-Saharan Africa and particularly in South Asia, you're talking about 100, 120 people sleeping in one room. So if cases pop up in these facilities, the consequences are just mind-blowing. And as Adnan said, you have staff going home each night. You have people cycling in and out of prison. So it's also not just about those 120 people in that dormitory, but actually people in the community. And so I think that in talking about, we are facing an unprecedented time. And so there needs to be unprecedented decisions that follow that.
Yeah. Olivia, I'm so glad you say that, because you're echoing or even channeling what people are saying on YouTube. Ibrahim Osman, for instance, says prisons in Africa are overpopulated. There's almost no preventative measures. That's in terms of health measures to stop COVID-19 disease in prisons. And then Sabrina is talking about Ghana to Ethiopia. They've released prisoners and, for example, pre-trial, low-risk, elderly, etc., to reduce the prison overpopulation. So this is unprecedented. What are the levels of bureaucracy, Olivia, that you are seeing that officials are now saying, okay, you need to just be out of prison?
Yeah, I think, it's as we're all in sort of lockdown. Adnan has definitely a different experience of lockdown, but, these are new times, new measures. And so very quickly, authorities can make decisions and, identify who are really vulnerable. So we are particularly concerned about older people in prison because of really long sentences and life sentences. There are more and more older people in prison. And you just cannot respect social distancing rules. You might not even have access to water to wash your hands, let alone kind of face masks and so on. So, releases really is the first thing, reducing prison populations, and not just releases, but also stopping the flow of new admissions. So France, Germany, countries like that, we have been really happy to see that they've suspended new prison sentences. We have to remember that there's actually 3 million people on any given day sitting in prison, not yet convicted, waiting for trial, sometimes for months, if not years. So that's also another group that, could easily qualify or, be released safely.
Nicole, there was something that caught my eye from the Marshall Project website. They have a special coronavirus section about coronavirus and the criminal justice system in the United States. And it was a series of photographs. They show prison beds, and they're only 3 feet apart. You see bathrooms, I'm going to just like bathrooms, and not bathrooms as we may know it if we're outside of a prison facility. Can you talk to us about the lack of ability to do social distancing in an area that is incredibly overcrowded? What have you heard from the families you talked to?
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as I'm hearing directly from some guys inside. One person I spoke to was recently released from Rikers Island, an epicenter here in New York City, a jail where, several people have tested positive now. And he's saying, we're in a dorm with about 50 men. And, officials are saying sleep head to toe, but our beds are 2 to 3 feet apart. What difference does that really make? Many folks have no masks. In some cases, they're running out of soap or, don't have consistent access to water to wash wash their hands. I believe the photos that you mentioned came out of California, which historically has had incredible overcrowding issues, where there are just literally more people than there are beds and more people than there are space to house them. And so you can see that, spending the necessary 6 feet, and I think I'm sort of seeing new cases where that might even need to be greater distance apart, just simply isn't possible. I'm hearing reports from guys who say that they're being crowded into small hallways as they make way to go to lunch, to go to the mess hall. There's attempts to do social distancing where, they're sort of staggering yard times or staggering phone times, but there's just so many ways in which you're going to come into contact with people, not to mention all the people who are sleeping in dorm-like conditions where that's sort of, what Olivia described, these big open rooms with many, many beds. It's impossible. How do you social distance in that kind of setting?
Yeah, can I jump in there? Can I jump in there and say that one thing, if I could mention terminology. So in prison, social distancing, we've been, during my 16 years incarceration, I was socially distanced by law. And so physical distancing in prison is impossible because of everything that you've explained. So during my incarceration, I'll give a small little example. I lived in a building, just a building with 900 people, right? There were 5 tiers inside in this facility where I was housed at. I lived there for my previous 4 years of my incarceration. So 900 people. When you are able to call your family, there are 12 phone booths. So literally 900 people are sharing 12 phones. 900 people are sharing about 13 shower heads that are public bathrooms. They're not shower stalls. They're shower heads where the drain constantly gets clogged, constantly. And the shower heads are about maybe a foot apart. There's times every time you shower, when you soap yourself up, or the person to the right or the left of you soaps themselves up, it gets on you. And people's dirt is falling off on the ground, getting on your feet. And so the conditions are sanitary and architecturally, prisons are built with punity, is built with punishment in mind. And so another example I'll give real quickly, the tier that I lived on, I shared one tier with 100 people. And if Dr. Fauci is getting on TV, the World Health Organization are saying stay 6 feet apart, but this tier, architecturally, it's 3 feet wide. How do 100 people that are housed there and over a dozen staff that have to work on these tiers provide 6 foot distance on a 3 foot tier? It is literally physically impossible.
Adnan, I really want you to tell our audience a story about, it's not a story, it's your life here, where there was a health outbreak. There was a health outbreak in a facility that you were staying in, and you described this as my experience with sickness, quarantines, and the prison's healthcare system. That outbreak was Legionnaires' disease. Just to briefly explain, that's probably the nearest we can understand as to what it might be like to have a disease like COVID-19 going around prisons.
I will preface by saying that COVID-19, as we all know, is something none of us have ever experienced. The closest thing, you're absolutely right, was, for me, in my experience, was the Legionnaire. One of them was the Legionnaires outbreak that occurred. So one day I was playing basketball in the yard. It was a regular day in a prison facility on the yard. And all of a sudden they said yard recall, which means everybody immediately return back to your housing unit and into your cells. Usually when that happens, we know something dangerous or wrong has occurred. Then we find out they say we are on quarantine. And that's it. Another thing about prisons is information is distributed very, very tightly and very secretly. And so we just didn't know what was going on. But what we found out was, because of this, whatever took place, all the water in our prison facility was shut down, which meant in my sink inside my cell, by the way, my cell was 4 feet wide and 9 feet long. And I was sharing it with another individual. And in this cell, the water was completely shut down, which meant I couldn't drink water, which meant I couldn't wash my hands. I just got done playing basketball, mind you. So whatever this outbreak was, I just wanted it off of me, and I couldn't physically. I just couldn't. Also, the toilet was shut down because the water is connected to the toilet, so people could not use the restroom. And we found out that whatever this outbreak was probably coming from the water. We were stuck in our cells for a few days. They did bring water later. We were ushered downstairs. And then when we were ushered downstairs, there was no concept of physical distancing. There was no concept of any of these type of preventive measures that were taking place in the prison facility.
So Adnan, I could literally talk to all three of you for hours, but we're almost at the last 5 minutes of the show. So basically what you were saying is just keeping clean, washing your hands, staying away from other people, all the things we're told to do right now because of the coronavirus is not possible in prison. Let's talk about where we go from here. And we on the stream spoke to a little bit earlier, Adriana Marfuti. He is an associate professor of criminal law. He is based in the Netherlands. He talks about how important it is that we address this problem with prisons, wherever they happen to be around the world, a potential disaster that could be happening. And then also we need to test, and we really need to have a couple of policies so that we understand much better what we should be doing. So, he also mentioned, Olivia, the WHO, saying this is what we should be doing. The World Health Organization, they've already published a list of recommendations, as have you at Prison Reform International. For our wrap-up here, what do prisons need to be doing?
Yeah, so apart from reducing populations as soon as possible, really they need to be supported so that, some prevention measures, like we've been busy with authorities in Jordan providing masks, gloves, and even just, the alcohol-based hand sanitizer and cleaning products so that common areas can be cleaned as much as possible. But I think, apart from the immediate recommendations, that should be followed as far as possible by WHO, we really need to look at who we're putting in prison. We need some radical change because more people are in prison today than ever before. We're talking over 11 million people. And within that, there are a lot of vulnerable populations. People have poor health often when they arrive in prison, and there's just a complete lack of healthcare in most places. Next week we're publishing a new report, Global Prison Trends, and we look at this absolute lack of healthcare. And when you hit a crisis like that we're facing today, it's just the consequences are just extremely grave. And the crisis is coronavirus, but really we've been talking about a crisis with prisons for years now, and this has just really pushed us over the brink.
Nicole, there's a story that you wrote for the Marshall Project, They Don't Care. Families of the incarcerated fear the worst as coronavirus spreads. There's a picture here that Adnan shared, and it says on Twitter, "Help, we matter too," a handwritten SOS sign outside of Chicago's Cook County Jail. Nicole, from the family's perspective, what do they want right now in this global pandemic?
Yeah, I think the sort of most important thing is just the framing here, right? That they want people to understand that the incarcerated folks are someone's loved one, they're someone's son, daughter, husband, right? That they matter, that they deserve, to be treated with dignity, with respect, to not be put in a position where their lives are at risk, right? It's the very least the system can do to keep them alive, to keep them safe. And so not taking measures, the families want people to know that you're gambling on their lives, and that really, it's terrifying for them in this moment. And then they're, again, don't have any access or any ability to really provide any comfort or insight or much needed supplies, like Olivia mentioned.
And then if you were leaving our audience with a thought, what would that thought be? Just a takeaway.
I think the thought would be, yes, a quick takeaway would be we have to think about people over politics right now. For us, all of us, we understand our interconnectedness right now with the pandemic. And so what I will say that this is a humanitarian issue. And because this is a humanitarian issue, it's going to require the best qualities of human beings right now to beat COVID-19. And those characteristics and qualities are things like empathy and ability to forgive and second chances. And we need to bring that out of us as individuals and put people over politics.
Adnan, Olivia, Nicole, thank you so much for being guests on the very first The Stream Home Edition from my living room. You made it look even better than it does normally. Thank you also, YouTube audience. We do appreciate you. The Stream Home Edition will be running at the usual times that you expect to see us, always online as well at AJ Stream. Thanks for visiting. See you soon. Yay. Good
Yeah,
job.
thank you. That
You
was
are
great.
so good.